Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Stockholm Design Talks, entitled "Moving Forward." And today we're moving forward with the hospitality theme of hospitality design. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to be here this morning. As you'll now gather, the acoustics here are actually great, considering we're in the space we're in. If you would like to contribute and ask questions or have something to say, given on the sort of topics our panelists are discussing, please feel free to do so. Put your hand up. I will try and ask you a question. I will then repeat that so everybody can hear, and away we go. So try and interact. Ask the questions as we go along. They're all happy to take them whenever. Don't save your questions up till the end. Okay, so try and, if you have something to say it at the appropriate moment. So thanks to all of you. Thanks, of course, to our speakers. I will introduce them in a second. Also to the organizers of the event, Cecilia Nyberg, who is responsible for the whole event, and also Ulrika Kellström-Attar, who is responsible for the seminar program itself. And also thank you from me to one of the media sponsors here, Sleeper Magazine. I'm a journalist writing for, in addition to Sleeper, a variety of other titles, including Condé Nast Traveler, Wallpaper, and various other design titles. So this morning we're here to talk about trends in hospitality design. And this is one of my jobs, is to identify these sorts of movements, these trends, and to write about them. If I think back to the fashion hotel trend, I wrote a book about this back in 2006, really before the big guys got involved. That's the Bulgaris and the Armani hotels that we see today. So that's the sort of thing that I'm doing. Today we're going to look at a number of those trends, more up-to-date trends, of course. And just to put things into context, it's not just about the hotels on their own or hospitality on its own. It's also, if we think about where hospitality sits in today's age of communication, in our digital age. So the traditional hospitality offering has been really hit upon by the likes of Airbnb and One Fine Stay, because of the transparency and the openness that the digital world brings us. And again, through social media, we're seeing a lot more interaction of the guest experience, which sometimes, in a way, is influencing what the designers are doing as well. Hospitality design covers a wide range of aspects. So here we're also not just talking about hotels, but we're also talking about spas and bars, clubs and restaurants. And if I think of restaurants, that gives me the opportunity to go straight into the introductions of our speakers. So first up, on my immediate left here, is Signe Bindslev Henriksen. She's the founder and owner of Space Copenhagen. She established this with her business partner Peter back in 2005, and in that time they've done well over 300 projects, which is really going some for 10 years. Her training is with the Royal Academy of Fine Arts and School of Architecture in Copenhagen. And whilst Space Copenhagen focus on interior design and product design for George Jensen, amongst others, the real reason Signe is with us today is for their work in the food and beverage and the restaurant design side of things. And some of you will be familiar with the restaurants in Copenhagen that they have been responsible for, including Geranium, Geist, and the world-renowned Noma restaurant. Next to her, Fiona Thompson. Fiona works for a company called Richmond International. She's actually the principal of that company. She she used to work for them back in the 80s, went off and did her own thing, and then came back as creative director, and now, as I say, is the principal of that business. They are specialist hotel designers, mainly in the upscale area of the hotel trade. So some of the brands they are working for include Asian brands such as Taj and Oberoi, and a lot of work with Four Seasons, for example, including the Gresham Palace, the Four Seasons Gresham Palace in Budapest, which is one of the finest hotels I've been fortunate enough to stay at. So she's giving us really the real hospitality hotel designer side of things. Next up is Soren Hallberg. Soren is our token Swede on the panel. He was a sergeant in the Swedish army, he tells me. He also worked for a small Swedish company that some of you may have heard of, called IKEA. Boo. No, said the designers. Actually, he was more on the ops side of things and is responsible for taking Swedish meatballs to the world. That was one of his projects within IKEA. Subsequently, he worked for a number of hotel groups, including here in Scandinavia, Scandic Hotels and Hilton. More recently, he set up his own consultancy and now is the co-founder and partner and CEO of Story Hotels. There are 2 Story hotels here in Stockholm, one in Stureplan, and recently opened in Sundbyberg, the second hotel. And the third up will be in Malmo, coming in 2016, that Soren's just told me about. That leads me finally to bring on to Hans Meyer. He is one of the 2 partners of Hotels Ahead, an Amsterdam-based consultancy. They look at concept development, branding, marketing, operations and strategic partnerships. Hans has a traditional hotel school background, worked for NH Hotels, the Spanish group, Golden Tulip as well. But for me, he's more better known for one of the real groundbreaking moments of hotel design, and that was the establishment from his idea of the brand Citizen M. Hopefully you've heard about this, but if not, you should try and find out about it because it's really something. So that's it on the introduction side of things. Just to summarize, Signe is really the restaurants person, if you like. Fiona is hospitality design, hotel design in the luxury sector. Soren's more coming at things from an operator, investor, owner type idea, and you'll hear lots of very sort of practical business ideas coming from Soren, I'm sure. And Hans, again, a hotel guy with lots of innovative ideas and different ways of thinking about things. So that's the panel. Now we're going to get into some topics, some of the trends that I see that the panel will discuss. And again, please chip in with your questions. If you have anything to say, let's get those questions going. Right. First thing I would like to ask all of you, whoever wants to chip in first can, is this idea of less is more. And what I mean by this in the hotel environment, I'm seeing certainly in Western Europe in the refurbishment of certainly luxury properties. So Fiona, this is something I'm sure you've come across. It's actually a 110-room hotel is refurbished and they end up with maybe only 90 rooms, but 90 bigger spaces which they're able to sell at a premium. So it's actually a different business model. So it sounds counterintuitive to refurbish and have less rooms, but what they want is less rooms that they can charge more for. So that's one way of looking at less is more. The other way, which I think is more obvious, is this idea of a lack of clutter, and here we see it particularly in Scandinavian design, the sort of a very sort of calm approach to design, and I think this is another aspect that I'm seeing coming into hotel design. But Fiona, let's start with you. Do guests want less?
I think the market we work in is generally the luxury market, and I think space is regarded as luxury rather than stuff, I guess. So in most locations we work in, people are looking for bigger rooms which are more flexible but not necessarily have more in them. It's a more authentic feel, it's a more luxury feel, and therefore whatever was within the space, whether that's a room, a bathroom, has a reason for being there. It's not just filled with things because every other hotel has them. So I think it's space that's a luxury really, rather than the fact that they're paring down. The business model makes more sense financially too. Certain parts of the world, the facilities that people are looking for as well are greater. They don't any longer just want a room, they want gym facilities, media rooms, other spaces within their own environments that they can use in different ways. So that's again increased the sort of business model or the size of rooms too. Okay, so more specific, I guess, more specific requirements for individual guests, and more individuality.
Okay. Hans, what about you? You've been involved with Citizen M, which is a very sort of pared down concept and has perhaps some of the smallest hotel rooms as opposed to the cubicles you might see in the Japanese context. Tell us a little bit about that and the less is more idea at the other end of the spectrum.
I think the entire idea about around Citizen M is that more relevant can be less. So what we basically did over there is what do guests find extremely important, put that on a very high scale. Like, for example, everybody wants to sleep in a great bed, everybody wants to have a great shower, everybody wants to have free Wi-Fi. So put that on a 5-star level. And the essence of Citizen M is that everything that people actually don't need, because I fully agree with, if you stay in a room for a week or maybe a few days, you need a lot of space. But if you stay in a room between a late night dinner and an early flight the next morning, you just don't need a lot of space. So then space, you can it can be smaller. You don't. I don't hear a lot of people being very enthusiastic that there were trouser presses, mini bars with a lot of expensive items in it, so you can actually take them out. So I think it's very much about what is your target audience, make relevant products for them, and leave all the other rubbish out. And in that way, you can also bring in a very economical product at a very nice price.
Okay, so relevance, the design,
Yeah.
by having been more relevant with the design, you can cut out the clutter. Would that be fair?
Well, again, to Citizen M, what we found out is that at that time when I started with Citizen M, you could stay in a budget hotel, but you always stayed in a very remote area, so in an industrial park or on the outskirts of the city, just because the the budget hotel model wasn't working in the city center areas because the land prices are too high. So what we said, okay, can we just minimize the space of the room and still create a lot of space in there? Because actually, if you look to the TripAdvisors of this world, almost nobody's complaining about space in the citizen room. Although Guy is very right, there are almost the smallest rooms we have in the industry, only 13.5 square meters. So we have, again, a totally different perspective to space. And by just having a space of only 13.5 square meters, you can go with your hotel in Tower Hill in London, and Times Square will be open in New York in a few months, and in the city of Amsterdam. And that actually is what people want. So with Citizen M, they have a very nice room with everything they need on a 5-star level, taken out all the rubbish, but at the same price as a budget hotel.
But Hans, as soon as I open my suitcase at Citizen M, I can't move around the room.
Yeah.
So that this is the antithesis of really what Fiona is saying in terms of the bigger rooms and the more space, and the client who wants more. Doesn't have to be cluttered, but it's just a different model. And it works in the city centre because they're charging a massive premium for these big rooms in a Four Seasons or wherever it might be.
It is exactly right, and I don't want to say that all rooms should be smaller, but a lot of people, like maybe you and me, just traveling with a small bag because you have to stay in the city just for one day. You're just not going to unpack your suitcase. So why do you need all the space then?
True. Soren, what do you think about this idea of room size? Where are things going, and what are you doing with Story? How does that work, and what will you be doing in Malmo? Bigger, smaller?
I'm not allowed to look at Guy, so that's why I'm not impolite not looking at him, but I've been told to look at you when I answer him. Well, first of all, I think that size matters. There are people ready to pay for big rooms, for more space than they need. And on the other side, there are people not ready to pay for it. We believe that a mix of room sizes is ideal. I'm not very fond of a one-size-fits-all type of hotels. I'm very fond of Citizen M because you have taken it up. It's not that small. But we see hotels coming in with like 10 square meters, and somebody decides that people traveling only need a good bed and a shower. They don't need anything else. That's completely wrong. If you're traveling 3, 4, 5 days a week, maybe 20 or 30 weeks a year, then it does matter the size and the comfortability you have in the rooms. So it's a give and take. If you're downtown like we are in Stockholm, we have 3,000 square meters all in all. We tried, of course, to fit in as many rooms as possible, but we still have 9 different sizes of rooms. We have only 9 of these 83 rooms that are 12 square meters big. We call them squeeze rooms. The rest of them are all between 16 and 25 square meters.
So for you, it's a mix. It's a mix of sizes.
It's a mix of sizes. There is
size matters, but one size doesn't fit all.
Right.
Signe, what about you in terms of this less cluttered idea? We talked a lot about hotels so far and hotel room size. What are you seeing in the F&B world and the restaurants that you're designing? Is it more about simplicity in those concepts that you put together, or what is your ethos on this less is more? What's your feeling on that?
I think actually that it at the moment takes different directions. But what is one of the strongest tendencies right now is that there is a need for some kind of authenticity. The feeling of actually the chain of values is put together the right way. That the experience you get is linked to what you see in the room, what services you can expect from the restaurant or from the hotel itself. So I think things are moving definitely into a more simple direction, or some kind of honest feel in terms of choosing materials, in terms of choosing design and furniture and so forth. But I think it can look very different. I think it doesn't actually point at one certain style, but I think the whole way of trying to the whole mindset around the restaurant, or the whole mindset around the hotel is a really important starting point for a dialogue between you and the client.
Okay, so it's this chain of values that you describe. The design aesthetic can be very different, but it's the same sorts of things that people want to express. This is a phrase actually that Rob Wagemans from Concrete came up with the other day, a return to analog. And you talk about authenticity, and I see this as well, something that's happening as a trend. The upcycling or reuse of materials with second-hand materials found, or chairs, lamps, and what have you. Signe, we see this in Ace Hotel, for example. Story Hotels has a very similar idea. In Ace, there's the Stureplan Story Hotel. It was an former residential block. They took the doors off the apartment doors, cleaned them all up, and they are now the bed heads. So your bed head is actually a door with a letterbox and what have you. So rather than throw these things away, they use them again. So and it creates a story. And it's authentic. I mean, is this what you're seeing? This sort of
for sure. I mean, there's something about the way you use materials, the whole vintage wave, which has been going on for a while now, where you put in antiques and old stuff. That of course
creates an atmosphere of a time that has been going on.
Why do you think we're doing that now? Why are we having this look to the past?
Because actually these elements, these pieces, they seem to have a certain impact on us in terms of there's a certain nostalgia, but there's also a feeling of back to basics. I mean, we've been living in the fast lane for a long period of time, and you suddenly seek values that feel more grounded, more genuine, and old materials, leather which has been worn or wood which has been touched, they give you that certain feel. I mean, it has simply an inbuilt poetry that we like. Poetry, story.
Fiona, how about you? Are you seeing this idea of reuse and upcycling in the work you're doing in the luxury sector? Are people interested in the antique type idea, or is it kind of look antique but it's actually brand new?
No, I think there's a combination. I think there is, in the last 10 or last 15, 20 years, I guess, there's been, in the luxury sector, everything is new, everything is refined. That's what's denoted luxury, I guess. And there is a move from that people want experiences, I guess, when they travel, even if it's just for a night on a business trip. They don't want to just stay in another shiny box. Whether that's vintage or reused, or whether that's just real materials now being used. So, really good timbers that have I think the design has more of a resonance and a depth to it rather than just a shiny interior. And that's a combination of using maybe old or just proper materials in a proper manner rather than in this sort of theatrical sort of smoke and mirrors way. And then it does have a longevity to it. Hotels are very expensive to develop. They're not changed for 20 plus years. So the fact that the design has to actually live that long and breathe for that length of time means it does have to have that sort of depth, if you like, in the design these days. And so the whole idea of buying it in China and throwing it away in 5 years, I think, has disappeared, hopefully to a great degree. Which was, people thought we can do a hotel, you can do it on this budget because we buy it cheap, and then it's expendable. I think that has actually, there's a whole move away from that we've seen, that we're trying to buy locally, use local products, and that they're made in an authentic way that is relevant to the local market.
Which is exactly what we heard yesterday when we talked at the design talks about Scandinavian design and the power of Scandinavian design, is that it's built to last. It's got some, there's an idea of handing down a piece of furniture that you might buy. Rather than buying 10 and throwing them away, you buy one good piece, look after it, nurture it, and it then develops a story and a heritage.
And as you say, good leathers age well, the fact they're scuffed or whatever, whereas if you buy some, cheap fabric front that's going to last no time at all, it doesn't have that depth. You can't keep it alive, if you like, for any given length of time.
Soren, sorry, Signe.
No, it's just that I agree, and the thing is that I think we also, as designers, we really have a responsibility of doing projects that don't look best the day we leave them. They have a long life, and we also need to consider that long life afterwards need to give something to the project instead of actually just falling apart or being worn in a way which is not either charming or sorry.
Can you really tell your client that on the day the restaurant opens that it's going to look much better in 3 years' time? Is that what they want to hear?
we try to, actually. We try to.
Soren, how about you? I mean, this idea I mentioned with Story Hotel and the reuse of these apartment doors, is that just sort of a cheap way of doing it? A cheap way of getting around it?
We didn't have any money left. That's why we saved the doors. No, not totally, but there is a conflict in building hotels, because at the moment when you do it, you are looking after each krona you are to invest, and it's difficult to find the money to invest, and therefore you look after each little krona you should invest. And instead of saying that we are building for a lease of 15 years or 20 years, and this furniture and this interior design should be here also in 15 years, you may take the easy way out, saying that, we are okay with how do you say that in English? Laminate?
Laminate, veneer.
Laminate, vinyl instead of massive, etc. That does not age as well as a massive material would do. So for us investing and for us being responsible for delivering a return on the investment, it's very easy to take that less expensive road at the stage of planning and purchasing, which is not always very smart. To take care of old things that you may find in an existing building, like we did with the doors, etc., that's of course a very nice thing to do, because you also get lots of sympathy from the customers. Any customer entering our bedrooms sees this door, understands that it's something that has been in the building for 80 years or whatever.
Okay. Hans, what about this whole sort of vintage idea? I mean, we certainly don't see that in Citizen M, but your experience, are you seeing a big wave of ideas in this return to analog scene?
I was 2 weeks ago I was in New York. I visited a lot of restaurants and hotels there, and there even office buildings. There's a real movement to vintage. I'm part of a jury in the Netherlands, and I made a tour through the newest restaurants and hotels in the Netherlands, and it's a tsunami of hipster and vintage things.
And again, why is that? I mean, is it just comforting?
It's a sign of the times. I mean,
what times? Our austere times? Is it because we've just been through a big recession and now we're all feeling a bit poor, so we'd rather have that old bit of furniture that's been scrubbed up rather than the brand new Vitra piece?
I think there are a few things. First of all, that we live in a time now where we see, we are very busy with overconsumption, which a lot of people actually think which is stupid. So we should take care of the beautiful old products which we have and reuse them. That's one. The second thing, I think we start to pay a little bit of price for our digital lives, where we have 600 Facebook friends. We're always taking pictures and videos, but actually not there with the friends we are actually sitting at a table on. So I think there's more a need to even that people want to go a little bit back to the older times. And for example, Citizen M is very high tech. You got an iPad where you can do everything in your room with. But now for the newest concept I'm working on, I'm actually putting a new light, a very old light switch again. And the only thing which is high tech is the very fast Wi-Fi, and the rest of it going extremely back to digital, touchable. And it doesn't have to be vintage, because I mean, if everybody starts to wearing yellow, it will become out of fashion soon. But it has a far more subtle voice than the luxury we have seen 10 years ago with a lot of bling bling, more.
Okay.
Can I?
Signe, please.
Yeah, I think also actually that the whole, I mean, there's been a tendency at the same time where you see hospitality meets the house of the private atmosphere, and vice versa. Actually, I mean, these two areas are actually merging at the moment. So it's also a question of not just creating a concept which seems empty for personality. It's also a way of actually showing that you have some kind of intimate relation with the choices you have made in a certain and for some certain reason. So I think this whole kind of privacy actually merging into hospitality is an important point.
Although that sounds like we're getting into the very dangerous ground of making a hotel your home away from home, which I think is the last thing most people want when they're traveling. They don't want to be at home. They want to be in a nice hotel.
Yeah, well,
perhaps.
but it can look very. I mean, it doesn't actually look
like your home.
It doesn't have to look vintage. I think it's a question of creating that atmosphere, and that can look in many different ways. I think we are adaptable to actually perceiving many different styles, because it's not a permanent experience. It's an experience which has some kind of beginning and an end.
Absolutely.
So you accept a lot more in a restaurant or in a hotel than you would in your own home.
Do you think there's more chance to be flexible and more extreme, given the quicker turnover? We're hearing from Fiona about a hotel. Not really. Yes, they'll do soft refurbishments, paintings, new carpets, and what have you. But for 20 odd years, that's going to stay pretty much the way it is. In a restaurant, the turnover in restaurants, a lot of them go bust very quickly anyway. But much higher turnover. Are you taking more chances, more risks there in the hospitality, in the restaurant design? Do you think?
Than in
hospitality. I mean, when you look at it, do you think I can afford to really go edgy here because it's only going to be 3 years?
We try not to think that way, and I must say one of the things that we've been very keen on from the beginning is that we go into a really intense dialogue with our client, actually to find out, what frames do we actually have to work in. Sometimes there's no budget, and sometimes there's a huge budget, and you try to kind of filter all that information of functionality, of economy, of time frames, and all that combined with the ambitions, the passion. What is this place gonna be or express? So there are always a lot of parameters that you have to consider when you enter a project, and the economy is of course one of them. So,
which is at least consistent with the idea of using good, strong materials that will patinate and last more than the 3 years I was suggesting. Let's move on to another trend, which is very broad again: demographics, and how do you guys see today's design changing with various the changing demographic profile. So there I'm talking about aging guests for on one hand, millennials, the guys born sort of between 1980 and just past 2000. They're now in their, some of those are in their 30s. What do they need? Intergenerational travel, traveling with children, for example, traveling with your parents. How do you think design is changing there? I mean, Hans, your idea of this, your new idea, post-Citizen M, is a sort of a long stay concept. Does that? Are you thinking demographics when you think about that?
It's about demographics. I mean, what I find extremely interesting is this entirely Gen Y millennial discussion. But what you actually see, I mean, I'm apparently not in that generation anymore. But what you see is that they have a totally different life than my generation. They are far more international. Almost 40% of the European students on a higher educated level, they want to work internationally for some time. They will have far more jobs than my generation before they are 40. They will have jobs we even don't know that they exist. And nobody had heard from a content manager 5 years ago. And they are also mixing business with leisure. So we also call them the bleisure generation. And what we now have, for example, if you look to the way we use real estate, we're building big office buildings. They are there for 8,700 hours per year, but they're only used for a little bit more than 2 hours per year if you deduct all evenings, nights, weekends, what have you. So if we look at that way of using space, while a lot of us are working on the kitchen table already, why could you create then hybrids, for example? So we're now working on a new hotel concept, which is basically on one side of the spectrum you got hotel rooms and short stay apartments. On the other part of the spectrum, you got short stay office concepts like Regis, for example. And we are merging these two business models into one new business model.
So a hybrid between hotels and offices.
And work. And actually that, I found out that a lot of people who have to work and live in the city for, say, 2 months, they rent a hotel room and they're going to rent office space, which I think is stupid, because in the middle, they are in a traffic jam. So we thought, where our lifestyles, working and leisure, starting to blur, why can't we do that with spaces as well? And at the end of the day, you're using the spaces far more efficient. You can put more luxury value, what have you, in this square meter.
And where are you at with this project? Does it have a name?
Yeah, we are still on the working title. So if anybody of you have a good name, we'll have a nice prize for that. But no, the working title is Zoku, and Zoku is a Japanese word for family, tribe, or clan. And there was a cultural phenomena in the Japan of the 1970s where people with the same lifestyle started to live together. And this concept is being developed for what we call the global nomadic tribe. So people who work 3 weeks in San Francisco, 2 weeks in Amsterdam, 6 weeks in Copenhagen or Stockholm, what have you. And we're going to facilitate this lifestyle because now it's possible to work everywhere. You just need your device and you can just explore the world.
Soren, what about you and your guests with regard to this bleisure community? There's these people who are, like probably most of you here, if you're traveling, it's business and leisure. You're going to stay for the weekend and do different things. You've got exactly this guest profile in your hotel. How are you? How does your design cope with that?
I can fully confirm what you say. We see it every day. Our design has maybe not been adapted thinking that a guest is or leisure or business. Somebody coming in on a Friday is not necessarily someone being a leisure guest, could as well be someone having a meeting or something day after. I think we have done a few things that confirms this. We have one room type that we call meet and sleep. Meet and sleep. So we let out the room for somebody who is
a big steak or a burger or something. Oh no, sorry.
MEE as in meeting.
Sorry.
We let the room as a bedroom, and the person having the room is going down for breakfast. In the meantime, we turn it into a meeting room for up to 8 persons. And when he has had his breakfast, he goes back and he meets his guests. The bed is then folded away, and you can really say it's a sleeping room.
Okay, but this is not a junior suite idea or a big. These are relatively small rooms you've got
there. No, relatively small, 22 square meters.
So it is possible to build that sort of flexibility.
But what we really see and have learned, when we opened 5 years ago, most of anyone did use Nokia and Ericsson. Where are they today? Nowadays, we see people sit in the lounge, in the bar, in the breakfast, dining room, wherever there is a seat, they sit from 6 o'clock in the morning to midnight. And the only thing they ask for is a possibility to charge their phone.
And wireless internet, of course.
And of course the Wi-Fi, that's like hot water, or cold water even, so that's a must.
Fiona, what are you seeing in terms of the size, the hotels that you're involved in? I'm thinking perhaps intergenerational travel in the hotels that perhaps you're involved in?
Yeah,
or other aspects of demographics. What are you seeing?
I think that the new generation is, the key thing is they're much better informed. They know much more about where they're going. They know about the hotels. They communicate with their peers, whether it's on Twitter, social media. So they make choices of where they're going to stay in a much more informed way than perhaps you traditionally did. A lot of, people used to book through big brands, and if they recognised a Four Seasons or a Hilton or whatever it was, they would think, well, that's of a quality that I can stay in whatever particular location. Now they're much more selective about where they stay, and they know what they want, and when they want it immediately. They don't want the formality of a traditional hotel. If they, as you say, they like to use the lobbies, the old idea of a big hallway with a reception desk has gone. The lobby is a big interactive space, both for the local community, because hotels play a big part in certain locations in the world, and obviously the guests. So they're much more interactive spaces.
Is that a big design trend then, really? I think that the changing lobby space?
Huge. It's a big waste of space that doesn't earn any revenue when it's just a hotel lobby. Nowadays they have to generate income and also be a space that's living. And the change of being a big part of the local community as well, where people come and go. They're not the intimidation of a doorman, so you don't feel like you should be in there. They're much more relaxed, less formal. And they're inviting people into them, I think. And it's inviting people to interact. People want to communicate with each other now. The formality of how people used to work and live has been broken down completely.
I think
from
perhaps
how it used to be.
in a cafe lobby environment, but last night at dinner, there's no way we're going to start talking to the people at the next table. So I don't know about this informality in an F&B sense. I mean, what do you think, Signe? In F&B, are you trying to design your restaurant offering so that people can have a chat with the guys on the next table?
I mean, you don't necessarily need to have a chat with the guy next table, but I think we all need, when we enter a space, we need to feel seduced one way or the other, and that can be, again, it can look very different, but we need and seek comfort and a space where we feel safe. And I think actually we are social animals. I mean, we are human beings who like to interact with each other, but that can just be by staying in the same room, not the feeling of being alone. We all know kind of that a packed restaurant is more cozy than an empty restaurant. So I think actually some of these, cross-cultural values are very similar, actually. The need of being somewhere with somebody else who are entertaining themselves or in groups or whatever. So I think these spaces are extremely important, and completely agree, and that's also what we see, that these spaces have become more active and also activated in terms of being designed, so to speak.
And give us some specifics then on those designs. I mean, is it lighting that's flexible, or is it a floor space without pillars, or how does this how are you showing this flexibility in your design? But maybe it's not apparent to me when I first sit down because it's already been laid out this one way, but maybe you can change this. Is that the flexibility you're talking about? Or?
No, it's actually not the actual flexibility of being able to move things around. It's actually more a flexibility of how to use the space, that you can use it in different ways, that you can sit down and have a quick lunch, or you can sit and work, as explained before. I think the feeling of being able to, that there's space for you also as a customer to personalize your experience, that everything is not set and decided for you. And I would also guess that be able to choose different things back and forth in the upcoming hotel experiences. That you can choose whether you want
I can see
access
how-
to this or that, and or you just want the kind of basis package.
Yeah, I can see flexibility in a hotel room, but in a restaurant, personalization in a
No, probably not in. No,
okay,
it was
so
the
we're not,
kind
we're
of the
not on
whole
restaurants.
lobby
You're talking about the
kinda-
bigger picture.
for
Okay,
sure.
cool. The other ideas I've got in demographics. Any questions from anybody? We're well over halfway through the discussion. Please, if you have any yes, we do have a comment there. Please. Older people, absolutely. I think I mentioned that. Aging population. Anybody here thinking about the aging population? Soren, have something to say? Fiona, I'm sure in some of your properties.
As I'm representing these people you are talking about. No, what we see is when we started our story hotel downtown, we thought, and especially other people thought, that we would only have like 25-year-old customers coming
Like Hans,
in. And
you mean?
like Hans
youngsters,
at
millennials.
that time, yeah. But that's not the truth, because we have quite a few people above 50 years, 60 years of age, of the simple reason that they are, they are curious, they want to be part of it, they are quick adapters of new techniques, and they like it. We have people up to, I would say, 80 years old, and they are meeting the 25 years old people in the dining room, in the bars, in the breakfast. No problem at all.
But are there any design specifics that are catering particularly for elderly people?
No.
No? So
Someone being 65 years today, they are quite fresh. They are competing with
fresh.
you.
Yeah. Fiona, what about
No,
you?
not really adapted.
Okay. Aging populations. Is
we
there a
don't-
requirement from owners?
To design specifically, no. I think, as Hans said, it's the older clientele are technically savvy. They're very educated. They still eat out. They socialise in the same way as the younger generation. I think there's less of a divide in the way that people live their lives now between the younger and older generations.
Does
It's
that sort of
much
answer your
more-
question? I mean, I don't. I think when I think of designing for aging people, it's more like handles that are going to deal with arthritic hands, or automatically opening doors, or this sort of thing for really elderly people. And that's, I think you're starting to see this in the old age people's homes are becoming much more like nice hotels, but they have to design them with wheelchair access on all the rooms and that sort of. Is that the sort of thing you were after? You're happy with what we've? Okay,
Guys,
super.
Hans. Maybe I would like to add, I worked for a very traditional hotel company before, and then we had an idea, and that was called, the marketing department came up with the idea, and it was called the Golden Years Club. And the Golden Years Club was for people from 65 and further, and the marketing plan failed, basically. Because what we find out now, somebody who's 50 now is a totally different person than somebody who's 50, 20, 30 years ago. So that's always difficult, even within Citizen M, where everything is quite modern. You see every now and then people from 60, even 70 years old, although we said in our target audience it's between 25, 35, or what have you. So we see a totally shift to people wanting to stay younger far longer. And the difficulty I think we all have with designing for aging populations is that we soon have to think about wheelchair friendly and what have you, and that's not the case.
Okay. Any other questions for our panel as we're getting on? I think in that case, moving on from the sort of this demographics idea, I think one of the big cultural shifts we're seeing is this idea of the emerging markets and the apparent huge influx we're going to be seeing of Asian and Chinese travelers in particular. How are you dealing with this in your designs, Fiona? I mean, again, are your clients asking you to design specifically for the Asian market, for the South American market? Are there particular nuances in the design that will appeal?
No, I think depending where the particular property is in the world, it varies somewhat. But I think the idea of international travellers is they actually want to go and experience the location they're travelling to. So they're not looking for a hotel that has all of the nuances of China. When they come to London, they want a London experience. So, and that's what they're looking to do. They're very people are educated. They're not looking for the security of having something that they're very familiar with. They want to broaden their horizons and experience different things. So,
But when you design a Taj hotel in London, are you designing a hotel that looks like a London hotel, or
Yes.
is it a Taj
Yeah.
hotel dropped into London?
no, you try and design for the relevant location for London. I think, and that's especially a city like that. It's got such a hotbed of culture and design ideas that it is very much a London experience.
So the
So I
badge on
think
top
the-
says Taj, but
the badge-
effectively
the-
it could say something else.
Could
and
say
it-
any, I think yes.
It's not
the
an
badge,
Indian hotel.
The badge should denote the quality of service and all of the other things that come with that. It shouldn't denote the design of the hotel. And I think maybe 10 years ago, a lot of the big brands did have a formula. You know, they had a hotel room that they wanted to roll out through the world so that people were familiar with it. So you had a Hilton hotel, whether it was in Amsterdam, London, or Guangzhou, would be the same. And I think there's been a massive shift away from that. It's irrelevant. People don't want that. They actually want to experience the individual locations they're going to. So I think that sort of trend at the time has disappeared completely certainly from the work we do.
Well, I have to disagree with that, but it's not
Do you?
about me. So other thoughts with
don't do it,
with
yeah.
regard to this the Asian Indian market. Operationally, Soren, do you see things there that you're having to adapt to?
We don't really adapt other than we, in our marketing and distribution, we try to reach those people, of course, but we don't change our product. We don't offer special rice cooking things in the rooms or whatever could be asked. So we stand for what we do, and we try to reach and to find the customers, of course. We want them to stay with us, but we are not adapting the product to them.
Okay. How about you, Signe? What are your restaurants doing? Are they delivering a Copenhagen experience, or
Not necessarily a Copenhagen experience, but I think again it's very much about finding these holistic values that actually creates a project which is worthwhile visiting. And that might have a local ambience, but it could also have a non-local ambience, but still with a significant personality. So I think very much, I mean, we have done a lot of different interiors and restaurants and hotel experiences where you more look for what is suitable for the occasion, so that it doesn't seem artificial. Because I think the experienced traveler see that and actually immediately. So I think if you can combine or again back to the chain of values, if you can obtain that totality, I think the experience can look very different.
so for you, it's a lot about this value chain, about authenticity and being true and honest, I think. in what
We
you're delivering.
certainly believe in that. That's for sure.
Okay.
But that's also the only way you can actually take a decision as a designer, because otherwise you simply don't have any. You don't have anything else to guide from except taste.
Okay. Interesting. Taste in a restaurant. Any questions for our panel? We're going to be sort of wrapping up pretty shortly. Soren, I think a question that I'd like to put to you from your operators, with your operator's hat on. We're seeing an increasing need to differentiate hotels, often through design. Does this really mean that design only sells the first time? Can you elaborate on that for us? What happens next?
I'm fully convinced that the design is only selling the first time. If you don't combine the design, which must be top, of course, with function and quality and good service and staff acting as they should, then you're out of business.
Fiona, what would you say as a designer? Does design only sell once?
I don't think it only sells once. I think Soren's absolutely right that it has to be a combination of service, facilities, all those things. But I think a good design stands up for itself and people will come back. You know, if a room works really well, if a restaurant has a great atmosphere, people will come back to that. So I don't think it sells once, but I think it's part of the overall offering. It's certainly not. You're not going to go to a hotel just because it's a great design.
Okay, but perhaps a little hook.
For sure.
what about something we haven't really touched on at all here? Sustainability. We talked about materials and the longevity of materials. Fiona, that's something else I wanted to talk to you really about in terms of the reuse aspect, which you're not really seeing in your upscale properties. But materials, yes, the clients are prepared to pay for the best marbles, the best leathers, etc., etc. Is that the only aspect of sustainability that designers should be considering?
No, I think there's two sides in a hotel. There's we are, I suppose, involved more heavily in the design. When we're building a new building these days, it's always LEED associated or BREEAM. So the actual constructability of the hotel is always, I suppose, driven, and clients and developers look to actually achieve those levels. The operation of a hotel are big, heavy, guzzling energy burners. In reality, they're not environmentally friendly, and there is a trend towards looking towards that, trying to make them more efficient, trying to, in the operations side, obviously make them better sustainability-wise. And it's also on, as I was touched on earlier, I guess, the furniture and things. It's not bringing things in from China. It is trying to use local product, local materials. And again, it depends where you're working in the world as to the sort of desire, I guess, of the individual developers as to whether they want to achieve that or not. We're seeing it more in the established markets. In the new world, there's still that desire that it has to be shiny, and labels sell, I guess. It's the same as we were talking earlier in fashion, that where people have got money that's just coming out of China or the Eastern Russian states, they want things that are recognizable because they're labels of luxury, and therefore the fact that they can afford them. So that still is endemic, I have to be honest, in hotel design too, in certain parts of the world. Okay.
I think we're sort of on the way to wrap up the session now. So, I mean, we heard there a little bit about a trend from you, sustainability, and various ways of looking at that. Other panelists, I mean, I think Signe, in terms of one trend we haven't perhaps touched on, you would like to consider, or a future trend, something you think, or a driver, something that will drive future hotel design. Signe, I think your big one is authenticity. Do you want to develop that, or someone else chip in while you think of something else? Hans, you got some idea? What's the next big thing, kind of the next big trend, or?
I think that the next big thing will be that design is now very much focused on offline, so a building.
Offline?
Offline.
Okay.
But I think the integration of offline and online, that will be a big thing, I think, for the next few years. If you look, for example, to a concept like Uber, the taxi concept, which is extremely successful now, which is still a taxi concept, but it's so extremely successful because they have a very online and offline seamless integration between the two of them.
Say the name of this again.
Uber. U-B-E-R. It's
Uber.
Yeah.
Uber. Sorry, pronunciation. Okay, a bit like Halo, I think, in London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. And from a sustainability point of view, what you see is that and I think that still will become a big trend. I mean, it's not more about energy-saving light bulbs, but how much space are we using for the entire world? If you would make a picture now of Stockholm, and you would see all the empty space which is in the city now, in bathrooms, bedrooms, living rooms, offices, what have you, and you think about how much space we are using now altogether, because we use triple the space altogether than 50 years ago. I think that's the reason why concepts like Airbnb are so successful, because they actually point out all the space in the city which is actually not used, and they give it back to the consumer.
Which is why you're hoping Soku will be successful. Okay, Soren, an idea, a concept,
I think maybe
trend.
I would like to highlight what we see here in Scandinavia, that people go out to restaurant much more than they did just 10 years ago.
Are they just richer?
They are not richer. They pay less actually than they did 10 years ago, but they are more.
Restaurants cheaper.
They are more willing to go to the restaurants, to meet in restaurants, to work in restaurants. So you see them from early morning to late night, as we said. So therefore, planning restaurants, hotel or not hotel, must be much more than just be prepared for a lunch rush and a dinner rush. Now it's 16 hours a day.
Signe, would you agree with that? Restaurants, 16 hours a day?
That sounds wonderful, but yeah, I think actually that it's a growing market also because I think the family patterns have changed. We are a lot of a lot of the things that actually, in terms of values, binded us together before are not that necessarily grounded in society anymore. So I think we seek new values in terms of actually seeking out and reaching out for different experiences and meeting people and finding some kind of faith or belief in interacting with each other. So I think there's a point in that.
Fiona, any last word?
No, I think it's
No?
just the amount of people travelling really is just huge, and therefore that market is so much more diverse than it used to be.
Great. I think we've done, the panel have done a great job. We've attracted almost a second audience who have had to stand. Sorry about that. We've kept the baby occupied almost for the entire program, so you've been very engaging clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank my panelists, Signe, Fiona, Soren and Hans. Thank you.